Hello YouTube! Chrisiosity here. So recently Laci Green has come out with some videos and tweets that have garnered a very mixed reaction from the social justice community. Well, to be fair, from multiple online communities, but the social justice community is the one I'm from and the one I care about. And there's been a lot of stuff thrown around, some support, but a lot of anger and criticism as well. Some people seem confused as to why this is so, and so I thought I'd throw out some straight talk about what's going on and why some people have reacted the way they have as best I can. And I'm going to link Captain Andy's video as well because he's made some good points that I don't want to just retread. So, the one thing I want to make clear, because this is a concern I see a lot, people as a rule are not mad just because Laci is talking to people outside of the camp. Most of us have done this as well, some more than others, sure. There's always some discussion about it. So right now, I'm hoping to deconstruct things a little bit and see what the real issues are here. And one more note, this is not intended to be a video bashing her. It's not personal. I have no animosity to her. I'm just gonna be honest about what I see as the problems here. I'm sure people could do entire videos on her good points as well. But yeah, I mean, she's been making her flirtations with red pillory very public, and so a public analysis and response seems fair enough. Problem 1. A lack of logical consistency. Or any kind of consistency, as far as I can tell. Laci's actions and words have not been matching up well during this process. And honestly, that's probably half her problem right there. Because people don't like it when you don't make sense. It encourages speculation as people try to square all the inconsistencies and just figure out what the hell you're doing. Let me give an example. So Kevin Logan made a video to Laci and tweeted it at her. Kevin, he does this Descent of Manosphere series where he has a recurring, the almost inevitable bit about Laci Green that features in there because a lot of anti-feminists have talked about her at one time or another, often not very nicely. And so this was like a compilation of those bits. She'd not heard of him, and Shoe on Head, one of her new friends, I guess, told her about the time he had said some nasty things about her and Armored Skeptic that I won't repeat here as they were gross. And Laci said, well, she wouldn't be having anything to do with anyone who said things like that about women. Now, you could argue this was a questionable thing, as Kevin has apologized publicly to Shoe, admitted he was wrong, had that apology accepted, took down the video where he said it, removed the offensive commentary. But you know what? If that's where Laci wants to plant her flag, that's her prerogative. But then why is she publicly talking in such warm, fuzzy tones about AndyWarski, for fuck's sake? I mean, I'll link some of his nastier vids, but there is no universe where Kevin Logan is verboten and he isn't. The things he said about Riley Dennis literally made me sick to my stomach. His outright obsession over Francesca Lee, including some really ugly speculations about her marriage and her sex life, it's disturbing. So what gives? It doesn't make sense. And she also wants to talk to Paul Elam, who, I mean, come on. I'll leave some of the other inconsistencies like this to just sort of discuss as we go along. Some other logical issues she's having include her constant fallacy of the mean and fallacy of false equivalences, as she paints the SJW and anti-SJW as having two equal extremes, and herself as the sane one in the center. Now let's put aside the false equivalence bit just for now, because I don't want to be here all day, and focus on the fallacy of the mean, or the argument to moderation. It's also known as middle ground, false compromise, etc., etc., and it asserts that given any two positions, there exists a compromise between them that must be correct. Now, I've been fighting against this one my whole life, it seems, so I'm well aware of how this works. A few years back, I was having regular arguments, for instance, about gay marriage, right, where the reasonable position was usually civil unions. So this is how it works. LGBTQ activists say, we have a right to marriage equality. And conservatives and Christians say being gay is unnatural and marriage is between a man and a woman. And then the reasonable center says, well, civil unions, or let the states decide, or something like that. Here's a thought. Instead of making a general appeal to centrism as if it should be understood that that's where the nice, good feminists are, try making specific arguments for specific issues. When asked what you think, don't say, well, I'm not extreme, as that immediately paints anyone who disagrees with you as some kind of mad radical, while not addressing anyone's actual arguments or point of view. And believe me, Laci, the only people who ever thought you were an extremist are the people who, despite being completely and obviously wrong about you, you felt must have some hidden insights just waiting for discovery. And of course, the people who do know you, well, you don't appear to value their criticisms as much. Problem number 2. The optics are lousy and the tone is deaf. Now, usually things like bad optics or being tone deaf about your approach is a very forgivable thing. It's a thing people screw up all the time with the very best of intentions just because people don't often think about this stuff. Here, though, we have an unusual situation. We have a public figure, a public sex educator who's been on YouTube and television. This is what she does for a living. And here she is reaching out to other public figures publicly, right? She's doing all of this performatively for audiences, and there's no getting around that. So as the professional person around here, initiating and running this little sideshow she's got going, she's responsible for how she handles these aspects of it. So here's the optics. A pretty young white woman who for years has been one of the most public YouTube feminists has put herself up to be the bridge builder or dialogue maker, getting super chummy with people, some of whom spout all kinds of bullying, personal attacks, and bigotry onto others, including marginalized people and other feminists, etc. She seems a bit like Cassie J or others who seem to take an oddly uncritical approach to their new buddies. There doesn't seem to be any understanding that her privileged position makes things easier for her on this project. She sort of put herself up there as, isn't this great, what I'm doing? And while she said nobody else has to do it, it's kind of, I wish she would go into more detail about why for some people, not only is it something they may not choose to do, but it would probably be a bad idea for them. It's not something everybody's suited for, and it doesn't make them any less moral or good or brave or anything like that. Now, she has said that she was depressed and took an oh fuck it kind of approach, which may explain some of this weirdness. That's not usually an ideal attitude to start out a new endeavor with. Throughout this, she's been very self-centered. So she reaches out to people and they are, surprise, surprise, nice to her. Well, isn't that nothing? They're nice to a person with a bigger platform than they have? Someone who, for them, is a get?
Oh, and they're going to shame her. They're going to shame a woman into doing behavior that they don't like. How feminist of you. How amazingly feminist of you. Don't you get it? Don't you guys understand? This is a woman who with one video will reach more than all of you combined in a year. If I was you, I would be crawling on my belly, hoping and asking nicely, not check your privilege, but hey, Laci, will you still focus on some of the things that I think are important to me? To which she'll probably reply, yeah. Fucking get a grip.
So what? They aren't nice to people that they call trans trenders. They aren't nice to any marginalized person who challenges their privilege in any way. And all this, aw, people are criticizing me stuff that she's getting now.
It has been 14 days. And from the feminist side, I have seen a similar tone deafness. Like you guys may have seen some of the things that people posted after that video. I've spent an upwards of 40 hours the last 2 weeks talking to YouTubers on the phone, talking to people on Skype, just having so many conversations about this, and
yeah, it's just not a good look. As far as I can see, she's never even considered that she might have some responsibility here. Problem 3. Where have you been the past 10 years? I'm gonna go through some of these a bit quickly because they've been pointed out already. A lot of people are having issues with the sort of naivete Laci's been wearing on her sleeve. When she asks people on Twitter, why do you think there's only 2 genders? And then posts her map of responses with the superlative interesting on it. Everyone is left to wonder how a public sex educator managed to not encounter all this garbage before dozens of times over. And what the hell is so interesting about it? I got news for you. Prejudice, it's really not all that fascinating. It's repetitive. It's usually pretty stupid. So what gives with that? And so as one of the little people out here who've been interacting and arguing and streaming and debating and maybe do this for more than 14 days before showing up for your medal, okay? Just saying. A slightly more complicated thing to explain, but really important to understand, is the criticism of how Laci just seems to go along with the narrative framework of the anti-social justice crowd uncritically. She lets them set the terms, accepts what they say, without digging deeper. As an example, let's talk about the speech stuff, which is one of the things Laci has been most specific about. Now, anyone who's been around the skeptics or the rationals or whatever you want to call it, you get really dubious really fast about their supposed commitment to freedom of speech, and so you should. There's a tendency on that side to insist on a very facile, shallow understanding of what people are talking about, and when presented with contradictions in their ideas or their actions or their concepts that they're using, they just ignore them or deny them. Even a request for any kind of clarity of terms, at best, is gonna just get you more meaningless platitudes. Ironically, there seems to be an unwritten rule that the one thing you can't speak about is speech itself. Now, Laci takes on, unquestioned, the claim that harassment, hate speech, bullying, and other forms of speech are just too difficult to quantify, and we can't do anything about it. And then goes on to say, well, threats are unacceptable. This line is one I often hear, and as far as I'm concerned, that's all it is, a line. Because when the rubber hits the road, it always proves to be worthless. See, the minute you come forward with having been threatened, the skeptic shell game starts, right? They ask you for evidence, and if you do bring evidence for it, it won't be good enough, and it'll only bring more demands for more or different evidence. They analyze the wording of the threat to death and try to play it as not a real threat, and if they can't pull that trick with some weird inversion of language, then they will tell you it's just a troll, it's not serious, and demand you prove it to them otherwise that it could be serious. Right? Never mind that the only way to prove the seriousness of it is if you get attacked. What are you gonna do? Put it in your will that they pass your autopsy records along? Then they make videos slandering you without evidence, suggesting you're a fraud and a liar and a cry bully and blah, blah, blah. Occam's razor goes out the door, and you become guilty until proven innocent far beyond any reasonable doubt. And once those videos are up, you're gonna get dogpiled and harassed. What a great deal. Do you know how many people I know who've ended up being harassed because they actually had the gall to say that they were threatened? And isn't that a kick in the teeth? Of all the feminists or leftists I know who've been threatened, stalked, and I know quite a few. I know exactly 0 who've gotten anywhere with the skeptic community, even when children are involved. When Woolly Bumblebee came forward that her children had been threatened, people held to this, well, I'm a skeptic, I need claims and evidence, blah. It's a line of horseshit. And asked me, well, are you just going to believe her? Yeah, I am. Look, if there's a 1% chance that a child is in danger of being harmed, well, then there's 100% chance I'll do what I reasonably can to help. Because I'm aware that I can be wrong. It has happened. It happens to professionals. Do you know how many people have ended up dead after they weren't taken seriously by cops? It happens, right? And those are the people who should know what they're doing. I'm not an investigator. I don't have the training. I don't have the resources or the knowledge or anything to bring to bear to this. I mean, so definitely I'm not willing to bet the safety of an innocent kid on my personal opinion. And what's the risk the other way exactly? That I'll believe someone who's lying and feel silly? Or look kind of bad? How fucking narcissistic do you have to be to even give a shit about that? There's a cost-benefit analysis is not working out here. I mean, seriously, guys. Are you fucking kidding me? Can't be this stupid. Yes, you can. Sorry. But look, I've lost friends this way. People have been silenced and driven off of platforms this way. And the same people who are extremely sensitive of how being called a racist could shut down a conversation are all of a sudden incredibly insensitive to how having your children threatened might just do the same thing. So pardon me for calling bullshit on the entire enterprise. But so far, if there's one thing they haven't given me, it's evidence that they should be taken seriously at all. Problem 4. Bad ally and faithless friend. Okay, so as I have said, I don't feel any personal stake in this. I have no emotional dog in this fight. But that's not true of everyone. There are a lot of gay and trans folk out there who believed Laci was their ally. She gave them information and validation. If you grew up in a conservative or religious area, one where access to good sex ed was non-existent, then Laci may well have been very important to you. I know from talking to my trans and NB friends that this was the case for a lot of people. I've heard people talk about how she gave them words for their experiences and a way to explain it to others. Even just knowing they weren't alone was a great relief. As a cis woman, this is not something I could speak to, but I could certainly empathize why some of these people may feel betrayed and angry now. And Laci set this dynamic up. She was the one to sit on a couch with a big smile and tell people she loved them, and to go to LGBTQ conferences and tweet out things like how to be a trans ally, which, in case you're wondering, does not have a section on publicly endorsing the most disgusting transphobes you can find. And look, I'm not Laci's friend, so I'm not going to dwell on this, but watching her cozy up to the same people who have harassed her friends has been uncomfortable to observe. And what is she getting in return? Have any of these people met her halfway on anything, or evolved in their understandings? Because I don't see that, frankly. And at the same time, she's managed to put her feminist fam, as she calls them, in a really bad spot. If they go along with her, it means going along with her wide-eyed endorsement of bigots and bullies, which is really not cool. And if they don't, then they are the mean old feminists picking on this poor girl who just wants to talk to people. Aww. So yeah, if she meant to do that, slick. But if she didn't, maybe she should rethink some of her approaches. Going forward, look, Laci has disappointed and angered some people, but she's not been run out of town on a rail. Remember that tweet where she said, oh, she spent more than 40 hours on the phone with people? I get she was venting her frustration, but the flip side of that is that clearly there are lots of people willing to spend lots of time with her in dialogue. I know for a fact there are plenty of feminists who would happily accept her if she wanted that. And yeah, some would give her the side eye or just tolerate her indifferently, and some would openly challenge her. That's the way things are. Trust has to be earned, and if it gets lost, it's even harder to get back. Don't forget that creating a better and more just world is something most of us care about deeply. We've been sitting here, slogging it out, day to day, week to week, and the only thing we get out of it personally is a rise in our blood pressure. So if you see somebody who comes off as insincere or too much on the white feminist page, yeah, we're gonna suggest some ways you could improve that. But hey, criticism is good, right? And everybody has to deal with the consequences of their actions. Well, hopefully for anyone who's watched the video all the way through, this has been enlightening as to the reasons people are not just thrilled to pieces about every little thing Laci's done lately. She's made some missteps, and where it will go from here, I don't know, it's up to her. And that's what I wanted most of all to tell people. This is her enterprise that she did. Nobody asked her to do it, nobody told her to do it. So how it goes is kind of gonna be on her. She has to take a look at what she wants, what she believes, and make her choices accordingly. And whatever happens will happen. It's as simple as that. And as always, this has been Chrisiosity, and you know you liked it, so thumbs up, and you know you want more, so subscribe. Bye!